Higher taxes, huge deficits, misplaced priorities. President Biden's new budget proposal includes the largest tax hike in American history at nearly $5 trillion. Joining us right now to discuss the details, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brendan Arnold. Good morning to you, sir. Good to see you. Welcome back. Biden's new budget proposal includes $4.9 trillion in tax hikes over the next 10 years. So after hitting a record high national debt of $34 trillion this year, Brandon, what impact would this budget now have on the national deficit?
Well, it would have a big impact, and you'd think that if you're raising taxes by nearly $5 trillion, you'd really be chipping away at that national deficit. Unfortunately, if you compare Biden's numbers to the numbers of the Congressional Budget Office, under the Congressional Budget Office current policy baseline, that means what is going to happen under current law, the deficit would be significantly smaller than what Biden is projecting here. And that is because not only is he taxing us by nearly $5 trillion, he's also creating massive new spending programs. He's expanding the government in ways that we haven't seen in decades and decades. And I think that's a real problem. Now, this is a visionary document. It's not necessarily going to go into law, but it's a real warning sign for people that think this budget needs attention and we need to move in a different direction.
Certainly a roadmap that he's trying to lay out right here. He claims also this is only going to target the wealthy and corporations, which economists are saying that's not true. He is proposing to raise the corporate tax right now from 21 to 28%. But talk about how that will inevitably affect lower and middle class families.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't extract $5 trillion from the economy and not impact people up and down the economic ladder. We would have a corporate tax rate that would be effectively the highest in the industrialized world, higher than that of even France. So when you have a tax rate that high, what you end up seeing is corporations and, more importantly, jobs leaving the country, going abroad. Companies that do stay end up raising their prices, so we see more inflationary pressure, and they end up reducing wages. So average Americans, working Americans, see less in the way of a paycheck. That is hugely problematic in any economy, but particularly given the high inflation that we're experiencing currently.
Yeah, and as you said, you would think these tax hikes would be reducing the deficit, but the Congressional Budget Office found the opposite to be true. And there's also some misplaced priorities. The budget increases IRS funding by $100 billion. What? What's that about?
This is so ridiculous. We saw this huge $80 billion boost just a couple years ago in Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Everybody hated it. Everybody was terrified. And not only are they plussing up the budget by even more for the IRS, they're actually repealing some important taxpayer protections that ensure that people are not unfairly assessed with tax penalties, a supervisory sign-off that is required before tax penalties can be assessed. This is such bad policy, it's not even funny. So, yeah, another incredibly misplaced priority here in this budget.
And additionally, the plan really just creates more government interference in private markets. For example, it creates this $10,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers, which, in theory sounds great, but what's that going to do to home prices in the housing market?
Yeah, this is another situation where Bidenomics is telling us what they want us to do. And in this case, encouraging people to buy houses, which is great. People should buy houses if they want to, if that works for them. But what happens when you subsidize the purchase of homes is you increase prices. And we've just seen from this most recent inflation report, as we have in the dozens that have preceded it, housing prices are out of control. Subsidizing them more is a bad idea. We need to encourage more home construction, not subsidize the price of a house.
Yeah, speaking of inflation, I heard Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen say in an interview yesterday she regretted calling inflation transitory. Remember that? Everything was transitory. Clearly, she says that was a mistake because food, housing, still huge areas of concern. Will we see another interest rate hike, Brandon? Can we afford another one?
We can't afford another one because people are maxed out on their credit cards right now, and those interest rates are taking a real bite out of the family budget. So we can't afford another interest rate hike. I think we will eventually get to the point where we'll see interest rate reductions, but unfortunately inflation has been far more stubborn. It certainly hasn't been transitory as they predicted a couple of years ago.
Yep.
So hopefully inflation will continue to drop. It's been pretty level since June of last year, but hopefully it'll drop a little bit and we'll be able to get that interest rate cut that American families really need right now.
All right. Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brendan Arnold. Great to see you, sir. Happy Friday Eve. Hope you have a great weekend.
You too.